Would you be the jerk for forcing your son to pay you back from their education fund? We'll get into that in a bit, but first, am I the jerk for leaving without explanation after mother-in-law pretended not to hear me? I, 32-year-old female, have a 7-month-old daughter with my husband, 34-year-old male. My country does ensure a long maternity leave for up to 2 years. However, I am self-employed and cannot afford to lose my clients, so I try to work while my daughter is sleeping and during the weekends. Lately, she's been teething, so I'm operating on little to no sleep. I have an issue with my mother-in-law. She does what she wants despite people asking her not to and then says, oops, or denies doing it. Things like that. It was annoying before the baby, but after she was born, it has become insufferable. Husband talked to her and set boundaries, so she stopped doing that when my husband is present, but she was still doing it when it's only me in the room. So we agreed she cannot visit when husband is not at home, and husband is not to leave me alone with her. Because of these boundaries, we didn't see them for a month and a half. They live 2 hours away, and we didn't find a mutually good time. They finally came over last Sunday. 20 minutes into the visit, my father-in-law wants to see a lawnmower that is broken down, so my husband goes into the backyard with him, leaving me, the baby, and mother-in-law inside. She's drinking coffee and eating cake. She sits next to my daughter on her playmat and tries to feed her some of her cake. I immediately told her no, she can't have that. Mother-in-law pretends not to hear me and proceeds putting her spoon to my daughter's closed mouth. I repeat, stop doing that. She can't have cake yet, and definitely not from your spoon. Still, she pretends not to hear me. I repeat it again, still nothing, and now there's cake on my baby's face and she's fussing. So I grab my daughter and go to my husband and father-in-law, subtly gesturing him to come back inside. After about 5 minutes, mother-in-law decided to go outside too and was approaching me and the baby. I gestured to my husband again, and he made an annoyed face. I had no energy to deal with any of this, so I stood up, went inside, grabbed the baby bag and car keys and went to the car without saying a word. Mother-in-law asked me where I was going, and I ignored her. I drove to my sister's, which is about a 15-minute drive. There were some missed calls from my husband, so I texted him where we were and that we'll be back in the evening. It was time for my daughter's nap and she fell asleep breastfeeding, so my sister told me to go to sleep too. After she woke up and had her milk, my sister took her and told me to go back to sleep. I slept around 3 hours in total, and my phone was on silent, so my husband's calls were ignored and apparently his parents left disappointed, and mother-in-law cried. My husband is furious I did this. We're still fighting about it. He can't believe I was so rude and took the baby away when his parents came to see her after such a long time. He's angry I couldn't have waited a few minutes so that he could finish talking about the lawnmower. I told him I'm too exhausted to deal with this crap. He left me alone with mother-in-law despite our agreement, be it only 10 minutes, so I left. Am I the jerk? Not only do I think OP's not the jerk, I think they did the right thing here. What they're doing is displaying that they're not going to be pushed around, that they're serious about not being left alone with this mother-in-law, and even if it was only 10 minutes, it's the exact thing OP insisted could not happen. And especially when in this situation, you're kind of looking out for your kid here too. You're saying they're not old enough to have cake, they're definitely not old enough to share germs using her spoon. An adult, a grandparent who is told that and cannot understand or process what they're doing wrong? It gets me so worked up I want to almost get physical. It makes you want to go up there and give them a shove and say, listen, I'm trying to set some boundaries. Insert choice word here. NO93G wrote, not the jerk. Your mother-in-law should respect your boundaries, and especially when it's about your baby. And your husband should have your back on that. I do understand that it must be uncomfortable and hurt him seeing his mother cry and be upset, but then he should talk to her about it instead of making you the bad person. The only thing I think you did wrong was that you didn't pick your daughter up after the first time you said it and mother-in-law didn't listen. Maybe that would have made things go more smooth, but then again, it shouldn't really be necessary. I do think that it is important that you stand up for your boundaries, and your husband should support you on that. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy getting to decide whether or not all of these people are jerks, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? That said, our next story is, am I the jerk for repeatedly calling someone stupid after they accused me of lying about my children's ethnicity? My husband is Dominican and I'm Irish. Our kids look like him in terms of facial features, but they inherited my pale skin. Our son has his father's dark hair, but my daughter's is borderline dark blonde. Genes are weird, what are you gonna do? Both my kids and myself have my husband's last name, which is a popular Dominican last name. There have been times we get looks when people hear our last name and my husband isn't around, but it's never been too bad and usually I shrug it off. Due to my husband's work schedule, he's rarely at school events, so most people just know me. There's another little girl in my daughter's class with the same last name as us. Her mom also volunteers often. When we met, she flat out said, "You're not Dominican." I said, "No, my husband and kids are." She said, "But your last name is X." I said, "Yeah, because it's my husband's." She pointed out how pale they are. I just said genes are weird. But almost every time we see each other, she brings it up somehow, making comments about how pale the kids are, finding it weird that they don't know Spanish. My husband didn't learn growing up, so they don't know it either. I just let it roll off because while it's weird, I'm not about to get into a peeing contest. The teacher asked the kids to make collages about their cultures. My daughters had stuff related to being a Dominican and stuff related to being Irish. They had a whole culture day where parents are invited. The mom of the other little girl saw my daughter's collage and rolled her eyes. Thankfully, not in front of my daughter. There were no other kids around at the time as they were getting food. It was just parents looking at the collages. I asked what her problem is. She said I'm not a real Dominican. I said I never claimed to be. She said my kids aren't either and that my husband is probably only a little Dominican and we're claiming a culture that's not ours. I was dumbfounded. All I could ask was, "Are you stupid?" She said there was no need to be defensive. Finally, I had enough, pulled out my phone, and showed her pictures of myself with my husband and the kids. I said, "Yeah, maybe research how genes work so you don't make yourself look stupid in front of a bunch of third graders." She got teary-eyed and walked away. I got the stink eye from some other parents, which I ignored. When I told my husband later, he said calling her stupid repeatedly when she already apologized was a jerk move. Am I the jerk? Not gonna lie, I think if I was the husband and I was told this story, I would laugh, I'd have a big smile on my face and say, "Honey, you were absolutely right." I think it's important to not get so fixated on the fact that OP called her stupid multiple times, and more so on the fact that she had been bringing up her kid's skin color anytime that they could. Just the other parent being so fixated on that detail, are you really in the wrong for saying, "Are you stupid?" I don't think so. Confusion Possible 590 wrote, "I mean, it sounds like she'd been harassing you for a while over this and maybe more than a little prejudice. Gatekeeping an entire culture? What if your husband didn't look Dominican enough for her? There comes a point where you stop being nice. Maybe you did take it a bit far, but repeated snide remarks wear a person down until they snap. Not the jerk because it feels justified. Genetics are super weird. Reminds me of a story I was listening to the other week about a family with only albino children, and the father blamed the mother for it, called her all sorts of awful names, had an affair, ran off with the mistress he knocked up, who had an albino baby. Our next story is, am I the jerk for punishing my family by no longer doing birthdays, holidays, vacations because my dad screwed me and my wife over? When my wife and I were talking about getting married, my dad said that he would give us a down payment for a home. We were thrilled and kept that in mind. We would be able to afford a good starter home with his help, and we scrimped and saved to add to it. Except apparently he meant a sum of money good for a down payment for a house near us, where the cost of living is low. He did not ever mean a down payment for a home in Colorado, where my wife and I have lived since we were in college. He said he thought I would be smart enough to realize that we would need to move somewhere with a lower cost of living than Colorado. He keeps saying, "Move to a cheaper city. Our lives are here. Our friends, our jobs, our hobbies. You can't exactly leave your home and be up on top of a 14,000-foot peak in 6 hours where my family is." I told him that we had never talked about moving back there, and we never would. That we would rather be stuck renting for a while longer than be stuck somewhere we didn't want to be, and the move to a cheaper city wouldn't work for us. He said so be it, and gave us the amount, and that was that. I expressed gratitude and thanked him for the money. It is still towards the goal. Well, because of this shift in our finances, we've had to make a lot of changes to save up the rest of the money. We've had to cut out vacations, birthday gifts, holidays, etc. We won't be traveling home for a few years. At our current rate, we should have an okay down payment by the end of next year, 2025. My dad confronted us about this because we won't come home for a summer break trip and told me that I was being a selfish, entitled brat because I hadn't gotten my way. that I was essentially punishing the rest of the family because we assumed what his gift would be. I told him that I was grateful for the amount he gave us, but that it means we do need to buckle down and save every penny if we want to be able to afford a house anytime soon. Even townhouses around us are easily over $400,000, and that's for the sketchy ones. But is my dad right? Am I the jerk? The problem I see here is kind of the golden saying of, you know what they say about assume? It makes a bleepity out of you and me. OP assumed that he would give, a proportional amount related to a house in their cost of living area? Was there ever a promise that there was going to be a specific proportional amount or an amount that would be able to get them to afford a house where they live? Am I wrong in assuming they still gave you thousands of dollars? And in fact, OP seemed to make such a big deal out of it and said, well, we're not moving back to where you are. We're staying right here. And all they got in response was, so be it. Here's thousands of dollars still. So how exactly did dad screw you over? Mbop wrote, you're the jerk for framing it as your dad screwing you over. He offered you a down payment for a home. You assumed it would be a certain amount. It wasn't, but he still gave you a generous gift. And now you describe that generous gift as screwing you over. Also, while you're under no obligation to go on family trips, to cut out any visits to them for a few years after your dad gave you this generous gift because it wasn't as much as you were expecting sends a message, whether you mean it to or not. Our next story is, am I the jerk for refusing to babysit my niece? My brother and sister-in-law say they caught me on the nanny cam not watching their child and working instead. I don't know who all they told this to, but it got back to me. What actually happened is, I was asked to babysit last minute, and I said I had scheduled work meetings and deadlines, but since I work from home, I could come over with my partner and take care of my niece. I offered for my partner to watch her with my supervision. Brother and sister-in-law agreed to this, and I sent several photos and video updates of niece having a lovely time playing with my partner, who is really wonderful with children and always so sweet to my niece. I was horrified that family, friends, and who knows else was being told that I was not properly caring for my niece. I communicated my limitation in advance, but they completely left that detail out and made it seem like I blindsided them. I decided to let myself cool down from this frustrating circumstance and then sent a message to my brother and sister-in-law saying that I love my niece, but I no longer feel comfortable caring for her on my own because of the way that things have been communicated, and, in my opinion, seriously misconstrued. This meant I'm no longer on the list of people that can be called last minute to watch her or pick her up from school. Brother and sister-in-law then started telling family members that I don't want a relationship with my niece, and I'm taking out my anger on her. They also said that I'm depriving her of a safe person to pick her up if something comes up. My parents talked to them, and my brother then says that they also caught me yelling at my niece on the nanny cam. I know this is untrue because she's a perfect angel every time I watch her. She's truly the sweetest child. Never have I even had a reason to raise my voice at my niece. My parents were immediately suspicious of this accusation for the same reasons above, and knowing how I am with children, and my niece in particular, they asked if brother and sister-in-law had confronted me about this, to which they said no, because I'll just deny it. Parents then said, what does a resolution look like to you? Because we're not sure how to help without understanding what you want. Brother and sister-in-law replied that they want an apology for me taking my name off of the list of people that could watch their child and to be available to watch her again. Am I the jerk for refusing to babysit my niece? I don't really know what game they're playing here. I don't know ultimately what they're trying to get from making these crazy false accusations just short of something that almost could have a more serious intervention. They're one step short of just blatantly saying, oh, OP abuses kids emotionally, if not physically for all we know. I mean, as soon as things even start approaching that, I completely understand why you shut that down and you say, listen, I am not associating with you liars. You start throwing this around after the first time, God forbid a second time happens and you still don't think it's squeaky clean and perfect like you want. Impossible Tutor 799 wrote, not the jerk, they sound super manipulative and controlling. Don't even bother with people who make crap up. Also, let anyone who repeats their accusations know that they want you to apologize for removing yourself from her school pickup and continue to watch niece. If you were so horrible, why are they still asking you to watch her? Also, I would communicate only via text with them from now on. OP responded to that saying, "I have started doing this, and since I have, always CC'd my parents as well so they know they can't go and lie to them about what was said." Interestingly, the second lie about the yelling was started after I started only communicating via text that included parents. It felt like they were attempting triangulation and it failed because I texted everyone and was transparent, so they tried another lie to triangulate us? I legit wish I had a psych opinion on their behavior because I don't understand the logic. This next story is, am I the jerk for saying, "just leave" at my cookout? My sister Nicole, 34, brought her new boyfriend Steve to our family cookout yesterday. It's for about 30 people. For the sides, everyone brought in sides. My sister brought one bag of store-brand potato chips, and Steve helped himself to beer right away before being introduced to everyone. We're having hamburgers and hot dogs and just hanging out with the family. It's nothing fancy. Steve asks, "Is this it?" when the first plate of hot dogs is done and waiting on the round of hamburgers. My wife says there will be hamburgers soon, and Steve tells my wife and sister about his family and how they have barbecue chicken, steak, shrimp, and many options. I picked up the plate of hot dogs and told Steve he could leave and go to his family barbecue instead. He just looked at me and drank his beer, and I told him and my sister to go since this wasn't good enough for Steve. I gave my sister back her store-brand potato chips and told her to get out. My sister and Steve left, and the cookout was fine after that. My mom heard about me kicking them out and was mad at me and told me to apologize to my sister. Maybe there was a misunderstanding, but Steve was just a jerk commenting like that at someone's house, and the first time you meet their family. My wife thinks I was right because Steve acted like that in her home, and insulting the host is a good reason to be kicked out. Others are split about 50-50 when they heard about what happened. This one kind of leaves me feeling a bit weird. On one hand, I'm like, oh, that's understandable. You want to go to your own defense. You know, it's pretty rude to compare this barbecue to their grandiose barbecues they have at home and essentially indirectly say, well, this is cheap and sucks. But there is a part of me that feels like maybe OP escalated a bit too fast. I don't know, I guess I can't fault somebody for kicking somebody out of their own house that with one comment almost can immediately try to just crap all over your entire day. That's one of those comments where he just puts down your whole experience that you've put together here, called it cheap, and it's just gonna linger around in your mind for the rest of the day. Rational Boundaries wrote, "Not the jerk. Why would you put up with this nonsense at your own home? I don't understand anyone who thinks you went too far. Do they think this jerk would have stopped at just one comment? Heck no. As host, you ensured your other 30 guests wouldn't be subjected to entitled, passive-aggressive bull." Our next story is, am I the jerk for telling my parents we aren't giving them money and they need to humble themselves? I, 38-year-old female, and my husband, 41-year-old male, have been stressing over my parents. My parents are screwed as they took out of their pensions at 55 and have only about $100,000 to $130,000 each left. Their house has some equity, but not as much as you think they would have, as they've withdrawn from their equity line of credit several times. My dad has a $100,000 truck and a vintage Porsche, and my mom has a 7-seater when they're the only ones now. My dad is very prideful and refuses to take anyone's advice, so it was a shock when they came to me and asked for money. He's had a lot of health issues and told me he's going to be taking Social Security now, he is 68, and quitting his job, which means they cannot afford their mortgage or car payments. They totally blindsided me. I had no idea how bad it was until now. Thinking back, I guess I should have known as they buy so much unnecessary crap, but my parents always acted they were rich. I told them point blank I wasn't funding them until I could see all their accounts and assets, and this caused a huge fight, but they eventually relented. I went through what they have and they really don't need my help. They just need to downsize dramatically. My husband is a CPA, so he knows this stuff, and we went through and told them what they needed to do. They need to sell all the vehicles and get a reliable sedan. They need to sell their 3,400 square foot home and buy into a single home with a basement suite or an apartment. I think the apartment is better as my dad struggles to mow the lawn and hires someone now anyway, but my mom insists she needs land for a garden. After that, their Social Security payments would be enough, and they would still have a small nest egg. This was met with them complaining that they would be living like prisoners. My parents were angry if they got a small single family, they would need to rent out the basement. My dad insists the basement, which he has as a man cave, is necessary for life, and my mom refuses to downsize, as she has a whole room full of clothes at their current home that can't fit in a smaller house. I got mad and told them they need to humble themselves since they're the one asking for money. This resulted in them yelling how ungrateful I am over the phone until I hung up. I told them that they have to do this because I'm not helping. They still have more assets than my husband and we have a son to save college funds for. My parents have been trying to guilt me by saying they gave me great Christmas presents and a college fund, so I owe them. I feel that was a tiny proportion of their spending and it didn't put them in this position, but am I obligated to help support them when they can support themselves if they downsize? OP's really not the jerk here, they're just being completely pragmatic and honest with them. I think OP and their spouse already went above and beyond by creating a plan for them that strategically shows them how they can get by on the day-to-day. They literally said, look, we did the math, here's how you can live off your retirement without ever having to worry. Forget them saying they don't want to live like prisoners, they don't want to live like what they think are peasants. Zorkeld Shorkin wrote, not the jerk. Poor planning on their part is not an emergency on your part. They can't afford their lifestyle if they downsize, but they're choosing not to downsize. Instead, they want you to subsidize their lives. Don't. If they're strapped for cash, they can sell stuff. Our next story is, am I the jerk for snapping at my stepsister after she tried to get her mom to ruin a trip? I have a stepsister, Ellie, who is the same age as me. Ellie has a brother, Seb, who is 2 years older than us. Our parents, my dad, their mom, got married 3 years ago. Seb has 30-70 time at his mom's, while I have 70-30 at my mom's. Ellie has 90-10 at her mom's. Seb and I are close, but Ellie isn't close to either of us. Pretty much the only reason I go to my dad's as often as I do is because Seb is there. But it's become really miserable to go there because of Ellie. She's incredibly self-centered, obnoxious, jealous, and just exhausting to be around because she is a professional victim. Ellie is bullied in school, and apparently has been for her whole life, so she doesn't have any of her own friends. Because of this, her mom always forces Seb and me to take her everywhere with us, and it's really difficult for us to just hang out in a room without her. Ellie actively participates in this by tattling on us and demanding her mom tell us to include her. When Seb isn't there, it's not as bad because my dad won't force me to do anything, but since he's not Seb and Ellie's parent, he doesn't intervene. 4 days ago, I was at my dad's and I mentioned to my dad that I'd been invited to go with Seb and his dad to a sporting event in July. Ellie overheard this, I didn't know she was home, and went to tattle to her mom, who came down and interrogated me. I only answered when the event was, because beyond that, she should be talking to her ex and my dad said as much. Ellie said it wasn't fair that Seb was taking me and not her, and her mom agreed and said she would fix it, and Ellie had this smug smile on her face, which was the last straw. I said she is a cruel person for ruining this and for never wanting anyone to be happy except herself. I also said that I have no idea what enjoyment she gets from forcing her presence on people because it doesn't make anyone like her, and if it's just fun for her to make me and her brother miserable, then that should embarrass her. Then I told my dad he's being a crappy dad for not standing up for me more, and I went back to my mom's. Apparently, things devolved into Caplet's chaos after I left. Ellie cried for hours and, according to my dad, won't speak to anyone now and has taken 2 days off school. Her mom is livid with me and her ex for letting Seb invite me on the trip and Seb for inviting me. Also, now neither I or Seb really want to go over there because it's a crap show, so that's caused issues between all the parents. My dad is saying that this is my fault for saying all that to Ellie and that I need to apologize. I don't think I do, because honestly I think someone else in Ellie's life should have said that to her earlier. Maybe I was harsh about it, but it's something she needs to think about. Even my mom is saying I overdid it and should have let the parents handle it. Anybody that's saying, well, the parents should be the ones to handle this, well, why didn't they? Why has it gotten to the point where OP had to address it? OP's not the jerk. Yes, it should have been handled by the adults, but none of them did anything. Comfortable C2454 wrote, question, is there a reason she's being bullied, and is she truly being bullied? Is it a result of the way she interacts with people, or is she truly being made a target from a mean group of kids at school? She's incredibly self-centered, obnoxious, jealous, and just exhausting to be around because she is a professional victim. Ellie is bullied in school and apparently has been for her whole life, so doesn't have any of her own friends. These traits might not get her bullied, but would definitely have people just simply refuse to be around her. Add judgment, not the jerk, but Ellie's mom definitely is. Even her own brother doesn't want to spend any time with her. OP responded to that saying, "We don't go to the same school, so I don't really know." According to her mom, via my dad, she's just that kid that gets picked on by everybody for insignificant reasons. I don't know if that's true. People are mean, but also Ellie isn't a nice person, so she might be a contributing factor. Her mom would never admit that though. Our next story is, am I the jerk for not contacting the school to get my daughter into a talent show that she didn't qualify for? I will be quick. My daughter is in 3rd grade and she tried out for the talent show. It is the end of the year show. In short, she didn't get in. The school is too big and if they let everyone in, everyone would be there for hours. She was very upset about it and had been crying. My wife wants me to fight the school and get her into the talent show. I told her no and this started an argument. I think it's good for kids to face failure and she thinks I'm heartless. I told her she can do what she wants, but I will not back her up on this. I don't think OP's the jerk here. I do think failure is a good learning tool here. And I'm gonna be honest, most rational parents will be able to understand whether or not their kid truly has the talent to be able to qualify for something like that. The last thing you want to be is one of those overly prideful parents that tries to get their screeching kid a time slot up on stage so that you can just get angry and yell at the crowd when they clearly won't be feeling it. NoHat9118 wrote, "Not the jerk unless she clearly should have been picked, and your wife could do her own dirty work." OP responded saying, "I don't think I could judge that. She went for dancing. She can dance. She's average for her studio, and I have no idea if the other kids were better or not. I don't even know who got in to compare. I can't be like, Sarah got in and my daughter's better than her, so this is unfair. Not to mention, I didn't see her audition. For all I know, she didn't do well." This next story is, am I the jerk for holding my son to a contract and making him pay me back from his education fund? My son came to me with a foolproof investment. I told him it was not a great idea. He said that he had a bunch of money in his education fund and I should just give it to him. He was fresh out of high school and not in post-secondary. If we had taken money out and he wasn't in school, there was a pretty big tax hit. I told him that I would loan him the money, but that if his investment didn't pay off, then he had to pay me back from his education fund. I figured it was safe since he can't get the money unless he's in school. We wrote up a contract for the loan, including nominal interest. His foolproof investment went poof. He got a job. It turns out that working for a living is harder than school. It's been 2 years and he's going to community college this fall. He managed to save up exactly $0 from 2 years of work. He did have a string of girlfriends and a few vacations though. I told him he has to pay me back before he empties the account. He got upset that I'm taking his money meant for his education. I asked him how much money would be in the account if I had let him invest it. He didn't have an answer. I got my money, but he is ticked. His mother's upset that I'm holding him accountable. I told her she could pay me back the loan, and he could have all the money in the account. She hung up. I could afford to write off the money. It is substantial, but not crippling to my future. But I need him to understand that money isn't free. I think if we knew the age of the son, when exactly they said, I have this foolproof investment, it might make it a little easier to judge, but still overall, OP's not the jerk here. They tried to push all their chips in and it failed, and they still ended up in a situation where they still have money to go to school. Paying your parent back the money you got loaned from them is only the fair thing to do. Forgerous wrote, not the jerk. He and his mother are just ticked that you didn't provide money free of consequences. If you bail your kids financially every time they screw up, they will never learn anything and will keep failing throughout their adult life. So you did your son a favor, and he can always come back for more loans, but the next time he will think all through much more carefully and will know about consequences. Our next story is, am I the jerk for giving the flowers I made for my son's and daughter-in-law's wedding to my own daughter's baby shower? My son's and daughter-in-law's wedding is at the end of June. Originally, they were tight on money and were upset over the price of flowers. It wasn't in their budget, and they had a very specific image. I looked at prices for what they wanted, and it was out of my own budget. I instead offered to do what they wanted with fake flowers. They agreed and sent over images for me to use. I have spent over $500 buying all the stuff and my own time. They turned out great in my opinion. I got a call about 2 weeks ago that they won't need them anymore and that they have the money to have real flowers, that they already booked it. So in short, all my time was for nothing. My daughter was over and commented how cute the flowers were. She asked if I could make her some for her baby shower. I explained what happened and told her she can have them. Her baby shower was over the weekend and she used the flowers on the tables. It was a nice event. After, my son and daughter-in-law came up and we got into an argument. They think I'm a jerk for using their flowers for someone else's event, and now everyone will think they copied my daughter for their wedding. My point was, I can give them away to whoever, and I don't think it's a big deal since they were used. That instead of me throwing them out, someone got to use them. Am I the jerk? I do think OP's not the jerk here. They set them up to help out. They spent a lot of money and effort just to have the rug swept out from underneath them and say, oh, never mind, we got it. Plus, and I don't know if this is just me not being observant enough in general, but I don't think if I went to this baby shower and saw the flowers or whatever, and then went to the wedding later on and saw the flowers there, that I would think, they stole the flowers from the baby shower. Would that actually be a rational thought that anybody would actually have? Are we gatekeeping flowers now? But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy Am I the Jerk Here story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.